The distress beacon had been a lie. Daniel Carter cursed under his breath as his ship's scanner swept across the barren landscape of Kepler 442b for the third time, finding nothing but jagged rock formations and swirling dust storms. The automated emergency signal that had forced him to make this detour was nowhere to be found. No crashed vessel, no stranded colonists, nothing. "Fantastic," he muttered, checking his fuel gauge. The unscheduled landing had cost him precious resources he couldn't afford to waste. Running cargo between the outer colonies was barely profitable as it was, and every credit counted when you were trying to stay invisible from both the colonial authority and your own memories. The wind howled against the reinforced hull of his modified freighter, the Vagrant's Hope, as Daniel suited up for exterior reconnaissance. Maybe the beacon's transmitter had malfunctioned. Maybe there were survivors sheltering nearby. His conscience wouldn't let him leave without being absolutely certain. That same damned conscience that had gotten his squad killed 5 years ago. He pushed the thought away and cycled through the airlock. Kepler 442b was what the terraforming companies generously called a pre-development opportunity, which meant it was a hellhole that might be habitable in another century if someone pumped enough money into atmospheric processors. The gravity was bearable, about 1.3 times Earth standard, but the air was thin and laced with sulfur compounds that would burn your lungs in minutes without a respirator. Daniel's boots crunched against the crystallized sand as he made his way down a narrow ravine, following the beacon's last known coordinates. His military-grade scanner picked up traces of metal fragments scattered along the canyon floor, too degraded to be from a recent crash. This beacon had probably been transmitting for years, maybe decades, its signal bouncing off the ionosphere in an endless loop until some unlucky bastard like him picked it up. A sound made him freeze. Not the wind, not the settling of rocks, but something organic, a whimper. Daniel's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he tracked the source of the sound. 20 meters ahead, partially hidden behind a cluster of volcanic glass formations, he spotted movement. His helmet's display zoomed in, enhancing the image despite the swirling dust. It was a trap, an old-fashioned spring-loaded snare, the kind poachers used when they wanted to capture something alive and relatively undamaged. And caught in its metal jaws was something that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. The creature was about the size of a large house cat, covered in fur that seemed to shimmer between silver and pearl, depending on how the dim light hit it. Its body was elongated and elegant, with 4 legs that ended in delicate paws. But it was the face that truly captivated him, distinctly vulpine, but with eyes too large and too intelligent to belong to any ordinary animal. Those eyes, a swirling mixture of violet and gold, locked onto his with an intensity that suggested comprehension far beyond mere animal instinct. A space fox. Daniel had heard rumors about them in the frontier bars, stories told by drunk miners and paranoid prospectors. Supposedly native to only a handful of worlds, they were said to possess near-human intelligence and abilities that bordered on the supernatural. The Hegemony's science division had standing bounties on them, dead or alive, though preferably alive for their research programs. The creature made another sound, softer this time, and Daniel noticed the blood. The trap had bitten deep into one of its hind legs, and dark purple fluid was pooling beneath it. The little thing was young, probably just a kit, and it was dying. "Easy there," Daniel said, knowing the creature couldn't understand him, but needing to fill the silence. He approached slowly, hands visible and movements deliberate. The kit watched him with those impossible eyes, trembling, but not trying to flee. It knew it was trapped. Daniel examined the snare. Military grade, with a biometric lock that would only release with the trapper's DNA signature. But military grade also meant standardized. And Daniel had spent enough time in the service to know their weaknesses. He pulled out his multi-tool and went to work on the secondary release mechanism, a manual override that most trappers never bothered to secure properly. The kit whimpered again as Daniel worked, and he found himself talking to it in the same soothing tone he'd once used with scared recruits. "Almost there, little one. Just hold on. I know it hurts, but we'll get you out. Then we'll see about that leg." The lock clicked open. The moment the metal jaws released, the kit collapsed, its breathing shallow and rapid. Daniel quickly applied an emergency medical foam to the wound, watching as the self-hardening compound sealed the damage and administered painkillers. The kit's eyes fluttered, and for a moment Daniel thought he'd lost it. Then, those violet gold eyes opened again, fixing on him with an expression that could only be described as grateful. The kit tried to stand, but stumbled, and Daniel instinctively reached out to steady it. The moment his gloved hand made contact with its fur, something extraordinary happened. Images flooded his mind, not his own memories, but foreign sensations and emotions that crashed over him like a tide. Fear, pain, loneliness, and then overwhelming relief and something that felt like trust. The kit was somehow projecting its feelings directly into his consciousness. Daniel jerked back, breaking the contact, his heart racing. The stories were true. These creatures were telepathic, or empathic, or something that human science didn't have a proper word for yet. The kit looked up at him, made a soft chirping sound, and then did something that would have been comical if it weren't so surreal. It lifted one paw and placed it gently on his boot, as if saying, "Please don't go." That's when Daniel heard the growl. It was low, resonant, and came from directly behind him. His military training kicked in, and he turned slowly, very slowly, to face what he already knew would be there. The adult space fox was massive, easily the size of a tiger, with the same silvery pearl fur as the kit, but with patterns that seemed to shift and move like liquid mercury. Its teeth, visible as it snarled, were crystalline and sharp enough to punch through armor plating. But it was the eyes that truly terrified him. The same violet gold as the kit's, but burning with an intelligence and fury that made every instinct scream at him to run. The mother. Of course it was the mother. Daniel didn't move, didn't breathe. His hand stayed well away from his weapon. Any aggressive action would likely be his last. The adult fox moved closer, its muscles rippling beneath that impossible fur, and Daniel could feel something pressing against his mind, like fingers testing the locks on a door. The kit made a sound, something between a mule and a whistle, and the pressure in Daniel's head intensified. More images flooded in, but these weren't from the kit. He saw himself from the mother's perspective, kneeling beside the trap, carefully working to free her offspring. He felt her desperate run across the wasteland, following the scent of her child's fear and blood. He experienced her moment of absolute terror when she saw a human, one of the hunters, touching her baby. And then her confusion when she realized the trap was open and her kit was bandaged. The pressure in his mind shifted, became less invasive and more questioning. The mother fox circled him slowly, her massive head low, nostrils flaring as she scented him. The kit chirped again and limped toward its mother, and Daniel watched as they touched noses. A brief moment of reunion that seemed to involve another exchange of those strange mental impressions. The mother's demeanor changed instantly. The snarl disappeared, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. She sat back on her haunches, still towering over Daniel even in this position, and fixed him with a stare that seemed to peer into his soul. Then she did something that made absolutely no sense. She leaned forward and touched her massive nose to his helmet, right where his forehead would be. The mental contact this time wasn't violent or invasive. It was almost gentle, like a questioning touch. Daniel saw himself again, but differently this time. He saw himself through memories he'd tried to bury, leading his squad through the massacre on Titan Station, watching them die one by one because he'd trusted the wrong intel. He saw himself drinking alone in his ship, running from system to system, trying to outrun the guilt. He saw himself checking that false distress beacon, unable to ignore the possibility that someone needed help. The mother pulled back, and there was something different in her eyes now. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. She made a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through Daniel's chest, then turned to her kit and made a series of complex vocalizations that sounded almost like language. The kit responded with its own series of sounds, and Daniel watched, fascinated despite his lingering fear, as they appeared to have an actual conversation. The kit kept gesturing toward him with its injured paw, and the mother would look between them with what seemed like increasing consideration. Finally, the mother fox did something that defied all logic and reason. She picked up her kit gently in her massive jaws, walked over to Daniel, and deposited the little one directly in his lap. Daniel froze. "What are you doing?" The mother sat back and watched him expectantly. The kit curled up against his chest, purring with a sound like crystalline chimes. The mental impression that came from the mother was clear as day. "Yours now." "No, no, no," Daniel said, trying to gently push the kit back toward its mother. "I can't. I don't know how to take care of... I'm not..." The mother's eyes narrowed, and the mental pressure returned. More insistent this time. Images flooded his mind of the kit alone, hungry, hunted. Then images of Daniel's ship, warm and safe. Images of Daniel himself. The careful way he'd removed the trap, the gentleness with which he'd applied the bandage. "You want me to take care of your baby?" Daniel asked, incredulous. "Lady, I can barely take care of myself. I'm a burned-out freight runner with a drinking problem and enough guilt to sink a battleship. I'm the last person who should be responsible for..." The mother stood abruptly and padded over to him. For a moment, Daniel thought she'd changed her mind, that she was going to take her kit and leave. Instead, she did something even more bizarre. She lay down beside him, her massive form curling around both him and the kit like a living fortress. The mental impression this time wasn't words or images but pure emotion. Safety, family, pack. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Daniel muttered. You're both coming..." The mother's rumble might have been laughter. The kit nuzzled deeper into his chest, and Daniel felt that strange mental touch again, gentle and warm. Through it came a sense of belonging he hadn't felt since before Titan Station. Before everything went wrong. Against every ounce of common sense he possessed. Daniel found himself relaxing. The mother's fur was warm even through his suit, and the kit's purring was oddly soothing. He was sitting in a toxic wasteland on a worthless planet, surrounded by alien predators who had apparently decided to adopt him. And somehow, it felt more like home than anywhere had in years. "This is insane," he said to no one in particular. "Hart would laugh his ass off if he could see me now. Carter's finally cracked," he'd say. Found himself a family of alien foxes. The mother's ear twitched at the mention of Hart's name. And suddenly, Daniel was seeing memories not his own. A different human, wearing the same type of trapper's gear that had left the snare. The human was setting traps across the canyon, checking a handheld scanner that showed biosignatures moving through the area. The mother had been watching from a distance, keeping her kit away from the dangerous areas, until yesterday when the kit had wandered off while she was hunting. Daniel's blood went cold. This wasn't random poaching. Someone was systematically hunting these creatures. Had been for who knows how long. The false distress beacon wasn't a malfunction. It was bait, designed to lure ships down to the surface where they'd be out of communication range with the colonies. A sound in the distance made all three of them tense. Engines. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. The mother was on her feet instantly, her fur bristling as she positioned herself between the approaching sound and Daniel and the kit. Daniel stood as well, cradling the injured kit carefully. His scanner showed 3 ground vehicles moving in formation, about 2 clicks out and closing fast. Professional formation, military precision. These weren't random poachers. "We need to move," he said, though he wasn't sure if the mother understood human speech. She seemed to, though, or at least understood his intent. She pressed against his leg, urging him toward his ship. They moved as quickly as they could through the ravine, Daniel carrying the kit while the mother ranged ahead and behind, checking for threats. The vehicles were gaining, and Daniel could hear radio chatter echoing off the canyon walls. They knew something had triggered the trap. The Vagrant's Hope came into view just as the first vehicle crested the ridge behind them. Daniel heard shouts, then the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging up. "Run!" he shouted, breaking into a sprint despite the awkward weight of the kit and the heavy gravity. The mother bounded ahead, reaching the ship's ramp in 2 massive leaps. Daniel hit the emergency release on his remote, and the cargo bay doors began to open with agonizing slowness. A plasma bolt sizzled past his head, close enough that his suit's proximity alarm screamed. The mother spun around and did something Daniel had only heard about in the wildest frontier stories. Her eyes flared with an inner light, and suddenly the air itself seemed to thicken around them. The next plasma bolt hit what looked like empty air and dispersed in a shower of harmless sparks. Telekinetic shielding. The space foxes weren't just telepathic, they were telekinetic too. No wonder the science division wanted them so badly. Daniel dove through the cargo doors with the kit still clutched to his chest, the mother right behind him. He slammed the emergency close button and ran for the cockpit, depositing the kit in the co-pilot's seat as gently as his haste allowed. "Hang on," he said, firing up the engines without bothering with the pre-flight checklist. The ship lurched as magnetic harpoons hit the hull, trying to hold them down. Daniel redirected all power to the engines and pulled the emergency release on his cargo pods. 2 tons of supplies he couldn't afford to lose jettisoned out the back, smashing into the ground vehicles and buying him the seconds he needed. The Vagrant's Hope tore free and rocketed skyward, leaving Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere behind. Daniel didn't slow down until they'd made the jump to hyperspace, coordinates set for nowhere in particular, just away. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He turned in his pilot's seat to find the mother fox had somehow squeezed herself into the cockpit, her massive form taking up most of the available space. The kit was curled up on her paws, already asleep despite the chaos of their escape. "So," Daniel said, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair, "I guess we're doing this. You do realize you've just made me a fugitive, right?" Those weren't random poachers. That was hegemony tech, probably a corporate black ops team. They'll have my ship's registration, my biosignature, everything. The mother fox tilted her head, and the mental impression she sent was tinged with what felt like amusement. An image filled his mind of the 3 of them together, traveling through space, finding others of her kind who were being hunted. She showed him hidden colonies of space foxes, struggling to survive as the hunters closed in. She showed him the kit growing up strong and safe under his protection. And then she showed him something else. Other humans. Ones who had helped her kind before, who had formed the same strange bonds. A secret network of protectors, scattered across the frontier, all marked as criminals by the corporations, but united in keeping the space foxes safe from exploitation. "You knew," Daniel said slowly. "You knew I'd been military. You knew I'd have the skills to protect him. Her the kit. You chose me." The mother's eyes gleamed with that alien intelligence, and her mental touch carried a single, clear concept. Family protects family. Daniel laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in longer than he could remember. "I went from hauling cargo to harboring alien fugitives in one afternoon. My life insurance company is going to have a field day with this." The kit stirred, making a tiny sound of contentment, and Daniel found himself reaching out to stroke its silver fur. The moment he made contact, he felt it again. That warm sense of belonging, of purpose. For 5 years, he'd been running from his failure to protect his squad. Now, somehow, he'd been given a second chance with the strangest family imaginable. "All right then," he said, looking between his two new companions. "I suppose we should start with names. Can't keep calling you Mother Fox and Kit. How about—" He paused, thinking. The mother's fur had that liquid mercury quality that reminded him of old Earth mythology. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protector of the young, seems fitting. The newly named Artemis made a rumbling sound that might have been approval. Daniel turned to the sleeping Kit. "And you, little one, you're tougher than you look, aren't you? How about Phoenix? You nearly died today but came back stronger." Phoenix's ear twitched in sleep, and Daniel took that as agreement. He turned back to his controls, plotting a course for the Outer Rim territories where hegemony influence was weakest. They'd need supplies, fake registrations, and probably a lot of luck. But for the first time in 5 years, Daniel felt like he had a mission worth pursuing. "Fair warning," he said to Artemis as the stars streaked past the viewport. "I have no idea what space foxes eat. My ship's environmental controls weren't designed for 3 occupants, and I haven't had to care for anything besides myself in a very long time. This is probably going to be a disaster." Artemis stood and padded over to him, resting her massive head on his shoulder. The weight should have been oppressive, but instead it was comforting. The mental touch she shared was warm and amused, carrying the distinct impression that she'd survived far worse than a traumatized human's inexperience with childcare. An alert chimed on his console. Long-range scanners had picked up another ship on an intercept course. Daniel checked the signature and cursed. Hegemony Hunter-Killer class, probably launched from a hidden base in the system. They'd found him faster than expected. "Looks like we're going to test this partnership sooner than planned," he said, reaching for the weapon controls he'd hoped never to use again. "You might want to secure the Kit. This is going to get bumpy." Artemis moved with liquid grace, curling her body around Phoenix in a protective cocoon. But she also did something else. Daniel felt her mind touch his, not invasively, but supportively, like a hand on his shoulder. Through that connection came a steady calm, a predator's focus that sharpened his own reactions. The hunter-killer dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of them, weapons already charging. Daniel's hands moved across the controls with a precision he hadn't felt since his military days. Except now, it was enhanced by something more. He could sense Artemis's perceptions layered over his own, her alien senses picking up details his human awareness might have missed. "Unidentified freighter," a voice crackled over the comm. "You are carrying stolen hegemony property. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Daniel opened a channel to respond, his voice carrying a confidence that surprised even him. "Negative. Hunter-killer. I'm carrying refugees under frontier protection law. You want them. You go through me. Frontier law doesn't apply to non-sentient specimens. Freighter. Last warning." Daniel felt Artemis's mental touch turn sharp with indignation at being called non-sentient. He grinned, a wild, reckless expression that would have worried his old squad mates. "Then I guess we do this the hard way," he said, and pulled the trigger. The hunter-killer's first volley went wide, but Daniel knew that was just ranging fire. The next one wouldn't miss. He threw the Vagrant's Hope into a spiraling dive that should have been impossible for a cargo freighter, but his ship had undergone some creative modifications during his years on the run. "Hold on to something," he muttered, though Artemis seemed to have already anticipated the maneuver. Her claws extended, anchoring herself and Phoenix to the deck, plating within grip that left gouges in the metal. The second volley grazed their shields, sending sparks cascading across the view screen. Daniel's fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems. The cabin lights dimmed. Life support dropped to minimum. But the engines roared with newfound power. Through his connection with Artemis, Daniel felt something strange. She wasn't afraid. If anything, she seemed excited, like a predator who'd finally found worthy prey. Her mental touch carried tactical information, showing him weak points in the hunter-killer's armor that his human eyes wouldn't have noticed. "You want to fight back?" Daniel asked, incredulous. "That's military hardware out there, not some frontier patrol boat." Artemis's response was a mental image of Phoenix, injured and vulnerable. Then an image of other kits, other families, all being hunted by ships like this one. The message was clear. Running would only delay the inevitable. Daniel's jaw tightened. She was right. They could run forever, but the hegemony would never stop hunting them. Not unless someone gave them a reason to reconsider. "All right," he said, reaching for controls he'd installed years ago, but never thought he'd use again. "Let's see if I remember how to do this." The Vagrant's hope suddenly stopped its evasive maneuvers and turned to face the hunter-killer head-on. Daniel could imagine the confusion on the other ship's bridge. Cargo haulers didn't turn and fight. They ran, they hid, they surrendered. They didn't charge. "Freighter, you are making a fatal mistake," the comm crackled. Daniel didn't respond with words. Instead, he fired the concealed military-grade pulse cannons he'd salvaged from a derelict battlecruiser years ago. The hunter-killer's shields flared and held, but the surprise attack had done its job. They were taking him seriously now. The space between the two ships erupted in a deadly light show. Plasma bolts, missiles, and pulse beams crossed in intricate patterns as both vessels maneuvered for advantage. Daniel's military training took over, his hands moving with practiced precision, while his mind calculated vectors and velocities. But it wasn't enough. The hunter-killer was newer, faster, better armed. His shields were failing, and he was running out of tricks. That's when Artemis did something unprecedented. She stood, leaving Phoenix secured in her protective curl, and placed both front paws on the console. Daniel felt her mind merge more fully with his, and suddenly he could see space differently. Energy patterns became visible. Probability streams branched out before him like a vast web. Through her alien perception, he could see the hunter-killer's next move before they made it. Left. Now. Artemis's thoughts were crystal clear in his mind. Daniel jerked the controls, and a massive plasma torpedo scorched through the space they'd just occupied. But more than that, Artemis was somehow extending her telekinetic abilities through the ship itself. Their next pulse cannon shot curved impossibly in space, bending around the hunter-killer's shields to strike directly at their engine core. The explosion was spectacular. The hunter-killer's port engine erupted in a shower of debris and ionized gas. They immediately began venting atmosphere and listing to one side. "Impossible," Daniel breathed. "That's not how physics works." Artemis sent him a mental impression that felt distinctly like amusement. Physics, apparently, was more flexible when you could manipulate forces at the quantum level. The hunter-killer was crippled, but not destroyed. They were already launching escape pods, and Daniel could see on his scanner that they'd managed to send a distress signal before their comm array failed. Reinforcements would be coming. "We need to disappear," Daniel said, programming a series of random jumps that would make them nearly impossible to track. "And we need a place to lay low while I figure out what we're going to do next." Artemis returned to Phoenix, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the battle. The kit was awake now, watching Daniel with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Through their connection, Daniel felt a pulse of something that might have been pride or approval. The little one was impressed by their escape. 3 hyperspace jumps later, Daniel finally allowed himself to relax. They were in dead space between systems, floating in the cosmic void where no one would think to look for them. He engaged the ship's stealth mode and finally turned to properly assess his new companions. Phoenix's leg was healing remarkably fast. The medical foam had done its job, but the kit's natural regeneration was beyond anything Daniel had seen in Earth-based biology. The wound that should have taken weeks to heal was already closing, new fur growing to cover the scar. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Daniel said, gently examining the leg. Phoenix made a purring sound and playfully batted at his hand with one paw. The touch sent another pulse of emotion through their connection, this time clearly affectionate. Artemis watched the interaction with what Daniel could only describe as maternal satisfaction. She had made the right choice. Her posture seemed to say, "This human would do." Daniel's stomach growled, reminding him that it had been over 12 hours since he'd eaten. "Right, food. I don't suppose you two can survive on standard protein rations." Artemis's mental response was a complex mixture of images and sensations. She showed him her species' natural diet, small prey animals from their homeworld, certain types of vegetation, and, interestingly, pure energy in various forms. They could metabolize electrical current directly if necessary, though it wasn't ideal nutrition. "You eat electricity?" Daniel asked, then laughed at the absurdity of his situation. "Of course you do. Why not telepathic, telekinetic, alien fox creatures that eat lightning? Sure, that's my life now." He rummaged through his supplies, finding some dried meat that might work and a few fresh vegetables from his last supply run. Artemis sniffed the offerings critically before accepting the meat. Phoenix was less discriminating, eagerly devouring everything Daniel offered and then looking for more. "Growing kit needs fuel, huh?" Daniel said, scratching behind Phoenix's ears. The kit's fur was impossibly soft, feeling more like liquid silk than traditional fur. "We're going to need better supplies, and probably a lot more food if you keep eating like that." As they settled into an uneasy routine, Daniel found himself studying his guests more closely. Artemis was even more magnificent up close. Her fur patterns shifted subtly as she moved, creating an almost hypnotic effect. He noticed scars beneath the fur, old wounds that told stories of previous encounters with hunters. She was a survivor, a warrior mother who had kept her kid alive against impossible odds. Phoenix, in contrast, was pure innocence and curiosity. The kid explored every corner of the small cabin, investigating every surface with tiny paws and whiskers. Daniel had to stop the little one from chewing on power cables twice, each time receiving a mental pulse of mischief that suggested Phoenix knew exactly what shouldn't be chewed on. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" Daniel said, pulling Phoenix away from his navigation console for the third time. The kit responded by climbing onto his lap and curling up into a perfect silver ball, purring with that crystalline chime sound. The moment of peace was interrupted by an alert on his console. Not a threat this time, but an encrypted message on a frequency he hadn't used in years. His old military emergency channel, the one his squad had used for Black Ops communications. Daniel hesitated before opening it. That channel should have been dead, purged along with all records of his unit after the Titan Station disaster. The fact that someone was using it meant they knew things about him that had been classified beyond top secret. The message was simple. "Carter, I know what you're carrying. I can help. Dock at Freeport 9, Bay 47, come alone. M." M could be anyone, but the fact they knew his name and his cargo meant they were either very well informed or very dangerous. Probably both. Freeport 9 was an independent station on the edge of civilized space, a place where credits talked and nobody asked questions. It was also a favorite hideout for mercenaries, smugglers, and worse. Daniel looked at Artemis. "It's a trap. Right has to be." She studied the message through their connection, her alien intelligence parsing patterns he couldn't see. Then, she surprised him by standing and moving toward the navigation console. Her paw touched specific coordinates, and Daniel realized she was indicating they should go. You know something about this, he asked. The mental images she shared were fragmented, unclear. Other humans who had helped her kind. Secret meetings in places like Freeport 9. A network of protectors she had mentioned before. But also danger, betrayal, and loss. The images were tinged with both hope and caution. So maybe a trap, maybe not, Daniel translated. But worth the risk. Artemis's gaze shifted to Phoenix, then back to Daniel. The message was clear for the kit's future. Any chance at safety was worth investigating. Daniel sighed and began plotting a course to Freeport 9. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? The journey took 2 days through hyperspace. During that time, Daniel learned more about his passengers. Artemis, he discovered, could understand human speech perfectly, though she couldn't speak it herself. Her species communicated through a combination of telepathy, body language, and vocalizations that were far more complex than he'd initially realized. Phoenix was learning at an astounding rate. The kit had figured out how to open cabinet doors, operate simple switches, and had even managed to activate the food processor, resulting in a minor explosion of protein paste that took hours to clean up. But more impressively, Phoenix was beginning to understand Daniel's words too, responding to simple commands and even seeming to grasp basic concepts. You're not just intelligent, Daniel said during one of their training sessions. You're potentially smarter than us, aren't you, given time and opportunity? Your species could probably surpass humanity in every way. Artemis's response was surprisingly modest. She showed him images of human creativity, adaptability, and their unique capacity for both great cruelty and great compassion. Her species had their own strengths, but they had also learned to respect humanity's chaotic potential. Diplomatic, Daniel said, but I notice you didn't disagree. As they approached Freeport 9, Daniel felt his military instincts sharpening. The station was a massive converted asteroid, hollowed out and filled with a warren of passages, shops, and docking bays. No central authority. No law except what you could enforce yourself. It was the perfect place for an ambush. He suited up in his old combat gear, checking weapons he'd hoped never to use again. Stay on the ship, he told Artemis. If something goes wrong, take Phoenix and run. The navigation is set for a safe system. Just hit the emergency launch. Artemis's mental touch conveyed strong disapproval. She had no intention of abandoning him. This is not up for debate, Daniel said firmly. Phoenix needs you alive more than you need me. Promise me. The standoff lasted several long moments before Artemis finally sent a grudging agreement. But she also shared something else. A tactical overlay of the station that she was somehow pulling from his memories and enhancing with her own perceptions. She would be watching through their connection, ready to act if needed. Bay 47 was in the station's lower levels, far from the main traffic areas. Daniel approached carefully, weapon concealed but ready. The bay appeared empty, except for a single figure standing near a small courier ship. The woman was older than Daniel, maybe 50 standard years, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of scarred hands that spoke of a lifetime of fighting. She wore no uniform, but her bearing screamed military. Special forces, if Daniel had to guess. The dangerous kind. "Mira Holden," she said, not extending her hand. Former colonial intelligence, former being the operative word, thanks to creatures like the ones you're harboring. Daniel tensed. If you're here to... Relax, Carter. If I wanted you dead, you would be... She pulled out a datapad, showing him an image that made his blood run cold. It was Phoenix, but not alone. There were dozens of Space Fox kits in the image, all in cages, all in what looked like a research facility. This was taken 3 weeks ago, Mira continued. Hegemony Research Station Omega. They've been hunting Space Foxes for years, but recently they've accelerated the program. They're close to something, some breakthrough that requires live specimens. Why show me this? Daniel asked. Because I've been working to shut them down for the past 5 years. Ever since they took my daughter. Mira's composure cracked slightly. She was a xenobiologist, thought she was studying extinct species. When she learned the truth, tried to free the specimens, they killed her. But not before she sent me everything. The locations, the research data, the transportation schedules. Daniel studied her, looking for deception. And you want my help? I want your space fox, Mira said bluntly. Not to hurt her. The adult females have an ability the hegemony hasn't figured out yet. They can sense others of their kind across vast distances. With her help, we can find all the holding facilities, all the captured specimens. And then we free them all, and we make sure the hegemony never hunts them again. Daniel felt Artemis's presence in his mind. Her attention focused through their connection. She was seeing what he was seeing, evaluating this human who claimed to be an ally. I need to think about it, Daniel said. No time, Mira replied. The transport ship carrying those kits leaves in 6 hours. If we're going to intercept it, we need to move now. She showed him another image on the datapad. A hegemony transport vessel, heavy armed and armored, but with a known weakness in its shield configuration. The kind of weakness only someone with inside knowledge would know about. Even if I agreed, Daniel said, my ship isn't equipped for that kind of assault. Mine is, Mira said, gesturing to her courier ship. It looked standard on the outside, but Daniel's trained eye caught the subtle modifications. Hidden weapon ports, reinforced armor, military-grade engines. This woman had come prepared for war. Through his connection with Artemis, Daniel felt a surge of determination. She had seen the images of the captured kits, felt their fear and desperation even through the still photos. Her maternal instincts were screaming at her to act. But it was Phoenix who made the decision. The kit had somehow managed to leave the ship despite Daniel's instructions, slipping through ventilation shafts with an agility that defied physics. The little one appeared at Daniel's side, then walked directly to Mira and placed a small paw on her boot, just as had been done with Daniel days ago. Mira's eyes widened. It's true then. They really can sense intention, can't they? Phoenix chirped and sent a mental pulse that Daniel felt even from a distance. Trust. The kit trusted this woman, or at least trusted her intentions. Looks like the decision's been made for me, Daniel said. But we do this my way. No unnecessary killing. No collateral damage. We save those kits and get out clean. Agreed, Mira said, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. Your reputation precedes you, Carter. They still tell stories about the ghost of Titan Station, the soldier who saved 300 civilians single-handedly. They also tell stories about how I got my squad killed, Daniel replied bitterly. No, Mira said firmly. Command got your squad killed with bad intel. You did everything right with the information you had. I've read the real reports, not the sanitized versions. Before Daniel could respond, Artemis appeared, having also ignored his instructions to stay on the ship. The massive space fox moved with liquid grace through the docking bay, her presence immediately commanding attention. She approached Mira slowly, circling her once before sitting directly in front of her. The two females stared at each other for a long moment. One human, one alien, both mothers who had lost too much. Then Artemis did something extraordinary. She extended her telepathic touch to Mira, sharing the grief and rage that came with loss, but also the determination to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Mira gasped, tears streaming down her face as she experienced Artemis's memories. When the connection ended, she looked at the space fox with newfound respect and understanding. I see, she said softly. You've lost kits before, to the hunters. Artemis's eyes gleamed with ancient sadness, and Daniel realized there were depths to her story he hadn't even begun to understand. Then, we understand each other, Mira continued. We've both lost children to the hegemony's greed, and we'll both do whatever it takes to make sure no other mother suffers the same loss. She turned to Daniel. We leave in 30 minutes. Bring whatever weapons you have. This is going to be dangerous. As they prepared for the mission, Daniel found himself working alongside Mira with an easy familiarity. She was competent, professional, and clearly deadly when needed. But there was also a sadness to her that matched his own, the weight of survival when others hadn't been so lucky. Why trust me? Daniel asked, as they loaded weapons onto her ship. You don't know me beyond a reputation that might be mostly fiction. Because you did something most humans wouldn't, Mira replied. You saw a trapped, injured alien creature, and your first instinct was to help. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Phoenix had taken to following Mira around, the kit's natural curiosity overcoming any caution. The older woman seemed charmed despite herself, occasionally reaching down to scratch behind Phoenix's ears. Reminds me of my daughter, she said quietly. Always curious, always getting into trouble. She would have loved meeting them. They launched without incident, Mira's ship proving to be even more impressive than Daniel had suspected. The interior was a perfect blend of comfort and functionality, with hidden weapons lockers, military-grade sensors, and a medical bay that could handle almost any emergency. You've been planning this for a while, Daniel observed. 5 years, Mira confirmed. 5 years of gathering resources, making contacts, waiting for the right opportunity. You and your friends might be that opportunity. Artemis had made herself comfortable in the cargo hold, but her mind remained linked with Daniel's. Through their connection, he could feel her preparing for battle, her predator instincts sharpening like blades. She had fought hunters before, but never with human allies. The combination of their strategic thinking and her abilities could be devastating. The transport ship appeared on their sensors 2 hours later, right on schedule. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of Mira's courier, with escort fighters flanking it. This wasn't going to be a simple smash and grab. Second thoughts, Mira asked. Daniel checked his weapons one more time. None. I've been waiting 5 years for this moment, she replied. No backing out now. She brought up a holographic display of the transport. The kits are held in the forward cargo section. Environmental controls show they're keeping it at optimal temperature and atmosphere, so they want them alive and healthy. That's good for us. How do we get past the escorts? We don't, Mira said with a grim smile. We go straight through them. Before Daniel could object, she was powering up weapon systems he hadn't even known existed. The courier ship's hull reconfigured, revealing missile pods and energy weapons that belonged on a battleship, not a civilian vessel. Like I said, Mira continued, I've been planning this for 5 years. Through his connection with Artemis, Daniel felt the Space Fox's approval. This human female was a warrior worthy of respect. Phoenix, picking up on the adult's mood, had gone very still, the kit's playful demeanor replaced by focused attention. Once we breach their hull, you and Artemis get to the kits, Mira said. I'll hold off the escorts and keep our exit clear. Think you can handle the internal security? Daniel thought about all the close-quarters combat he'd seen, all the missions that had gone wrong and right. Then he looked at Artemis, this magnificent predator who had chosen him as family. Yeah, he said, we can handle it. The attack began with Mira launching a full spread of missiles at the lead escort. The fighter exploded in a brilliant fireball, and suddenly space was filled with laser fire and explosions. Mira flew like someone who had nothing left to lose, threading between enemy fire with millimeter precision while returning devastating volleys. They hit the transport's hull with a magnetic anchor, and Daniel felt the shaped charges blow a hole in the cargo section. No time for second thoughts now. He and Artemis rushed through the breach, Phoenix reluctantly left behind in the safety of Mira's ship. The interior of the transport was sterile and cold, all white walls and harsh lighting. They could hear alarms blaring and boots running on metal decking. Security would be here in seconds. Artemis took point, her senses far superior to Daniel's in the artificial environment. She led him through a maze of corridors, somehow knowing exactly where the kits were being held. Her telepathic abilities were tracking their fear and confusion. Dozens of young minds crying out for help. The first security team rounded the corner directly into Artemis's telekinetic blast. 4 armed guards were slammed into the walls with bone-crushing force, unconscious before they hit the ground. Daniel grabbed their weapons, adding to his arsenal. They found the holding area behind a reinforced door, marked with biohazard warnings. Daniel started to hack the lock, but Artemis simply placed her paw on the metal and concentrated. The door groaned, buckled, and then tore free from its frame. Inside were 43 Space Fox kits in individual cages, their silver fur dulled with fear and captivity. They all turned toward Artemis with desperate hope, their mental cries overwhelming even to Daniel's limited telepathic sensitivity. "We're getting you out," Daniel said, though he wasn't sure if they understood him. He started opening cages while Artemis stood guard, her fur bristling with protective rage. The kits tumbled out of their cages in a chaos of silver fur and frightened chirps. Some immediately ran to Artemis, pressing against her legs for comfort, while others huddled in corners, too traumatized to move. Daniel's heart broke seeing their condition. Some had patches of fur missing where samples had been taken. Others had surgical scars that suggested invasive procedures. "Bastards," he muttered, carefully approaching a kit that was shaking in the back of its cage. "It's okay, little one. We're getting you out of here." The kit looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for something so young. But when Daniel extended his hand slowly, the kit sniffed it cautiously before allowing itself to be lifted. The moment he made contact, he felt its terror and confusion, but also a spark of hope. Artemis was coordinating the evacuation with remarkable efficiency, using her telepathic abilities to calm the kits and direct them toward the breach. But they had 43 scared youngsters to move, and Daniel could hear more security teams approaching. "We need another way out," he said, checking his tactical display. "They'll have the breach covered by now." Artemis sent him a mental image of the ship's layout, somehow pulled from the minds of the approaching guards. There was an escape pod bay 2 decks down. It would mean fighting through at least 3 security checkpoints. But it was better than trying to go back the way they came. "Can you keep them together?" Daniel asked. Artemis's response was to emit a low, thrumming vocalization that immediately got every kit's attention. They formed a tight group around her, their terror managed but not gone. She then did something that amazed Daniel. She extended her telekinetic field around all of them, creating a barely visible shield that would protect the youngsters from stray fire. The effort was clearly taxing. Daniel could see her muscles trembling with the strain. Maintaining that kind of field over so many individuals would drain her quickly. "Save your strength for when we really need it," he said. "I'll handle the guards." They moved through the ship in a strange procession, Daniel taking point with weapons ready. Artemis in the middle, surrounded by dozens of terrified kits, and several of the braver youngsters bringing up the rear. The kits moved with surprising coordination once they understood what was happening, their natural pack instincts taking over. The first checkpoint was abandoned, the guards having rushed to the breach. The second had 2 guards who never saw Daniel coming. He took them down with stun rounds, unwilling to kill in front of the kits unless absolutely necessary. It was at the 3rd checkpoint that everything went wrong. The security team was ready for them, barricaded behind overturned tables with military-grade weapons trained on the corridor. The officer in charge was someone Daniel recognized with a chill of dread. Commander Marcus Kane, formerly of Colonial Special Forces, now working for the highest bidder. They'd served together briefly, and Kane had been brilliant, ruthless, and completely immoral even then. "Daniel Carter," Kane said through the checkpoint's speaker system. "I should have known. Still trying to play hero. I see. Let us pass. Kane, Daniel replied, keeping his weapon trained on the barricade. You know what they're doing to these creatures is wrong. Wrong. They're animals. Carter. Valuable animals. But animals nonetheless. And you're costing my employers millions in research specimens. They're not animals, Daniel said firmly. They're people. Different from us. But people. Kane laughed. People. They can't even speak. They're no more sentient than a clever dog. That's when one of the kits did something extraordinary. The little one Daniel had first approached stepped forward, looked directly at the security camera, and spoke. Not in words, but in a complex series of vocalizations that had clear structure and pattern. It was language, undeniably so. The kit then accessed the checkpoint's computer system. Not physically, but through some form of technopathic ability Daniel hadn't known they possessed. Suddenly, the corridor screens were displaying images from the kit's memory. Its mother being shot by hunters. Its siblings being dissected while still alive. The fear and pain of being caged and experimented on. The guards behind the barricade shifted uncomfortably. These weren't hardened mercenaries like Kane. They were regular security personnel who had thought they were guarding valuable cargo, not participating in torture. Tricks, Kane said, but his voice lacked conviction. Programmed responses. Artemis chose that moment to make her presence fully known. She stepped forward, her mental presence expanding to touch every human in the area. She didn't attack or manipulate. She simply shared her memories, her emotions, her love for her kit and her grief for those she'd lost. The complex thoughts and feelings of a mother, a survivor, a being every bit as sentient as any human. Two of the guards lowered their weapons. Commander, one said hesitantly, maybe we should maintain your positions, Kane barked. That's an order. But the doubt had been planted. Daniel could see it in their faces, the realization that they were on the wrong side of this fight. He pressed the advantage. You have families, he said to the guards. Some of you have children. Look at these kits and tell me you don't see your own kids in their eyes. Scared, hurt, wanting nothing more than to go home to their mothers. Enough talk, Kane snarled. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Artemis. Stand down, or I'll put this thing down permanently. Daniel moved before he could think, placing himself between Kane and Artemis. You'll have to go through me first. If necessary, Kane replied coldly. The standoff stretched for long seconds. Then Phoenix appeared, having somehow escaped from Mira's ship and made it through the entire transport vessel alone. The kit walked calmly through the gathered space, Fox youngsters, past Artemis, past Daniel, and stopped directly in front of the barricade. Phoenix sat down and began to sing. It wasn't quite music as humans understood it, but it was hauntingly beautiful. A complex melody of loss and hope, fear and courage, loneliness and family. The kit's voice carried something more than sound, touching emotions in everyone who heard it. Daniel felt tears running down his face. Even Kane seemed affected, his weapon wavering. One of the guards, a young woman with her own children's photos visible on her armor's personal display, stood up and walked away from the barricade. I'm done, she said simply. Court-martial me if you want, but I'm not guarding concentration camps for alien children. Another guard followed her, then another. Within moments, Kane was alone behind his barricade, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been shame. You're making a mistake, he said. The hegemony won't let this stand. They'll hunt you across the galaxy. Let them try, Daniel replied. Now move, or I move you. Kane held his position for another moment, then slowly backed away, his weapon still raised but no longer aimed. This isn't over, Carter. No, Daniel agreed. It's just beginning. They moved past the abandoned checkpoint quickly. The escape pod bay was just ahead, but Daniel could hear explosions from outside the ship. Mira's battle with the escorts was intensifying, and from the sound of it, she was taking damage. The pod bay held a dozen emergency vessels, each capable of holding 10 humans. Or, as it turned out, about 15 Space Fox kits. Daniel and Artemis worked quickly to load the youngsters, trying to keep family groups together where they could identify them. Some of the kits were siblings, clinging to each other with desperate affection. Others were alone, the last of their families. "Mira, we've got them," Daniel said into his comm. "Launching escape pods now. Can you cover us?" "Little busy here," Mira's strained voice came back, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "But I'll do what I can. Launch on my mark." Daniel programmed the pods with coordinates for a safe rendezvous point, then looked at Artemis. "You should go with them. Make sure they stay calm." Artemis's response was immediate and firm. She wasn't leaving without him and Phoenix. Families stayed together. "Stubborn," Daniel muttered, but he was secretly grateful. He didn't want to face what was coming alone. "Mark," Mira shouted. Daniel hit the launch sequence, and 10 pods shot out into space simultaneously. Through the bay's viewport, he could see Mira's ship laying down covering fire, her weapons creating a protective screen around the fleeing pods. But he could also see the damage she'd taken. Half her hull was scorched, and one engine was trailing plasma. They needed to help her. But first, they had to get off this transport. Daniel was heading for the last pod when Kane appeared in the doorway, weapon raised. "I said this wasn't over," he growled. The shot would have killed Daniel if Artemis hadn't been ready. Her telekinetic shield deflected the plasma bolt, sending it ricocheting into the bay's control panel. Sparks flew, and emergency klaxons began blaring. Kane fired again. And again, Artemis deflected. But Daniel could feel her exhaustion through their link. She had pushed herself too hard, protecting all those kits. Her shields were weakening. Daniel returned fire, forcing Kane to take cover. They exchanged shots in a deadly dance, each knowing the other's tactics from their shared military background. But this wasn't a training exercise, and there was no room for the honor they'd once shared as soldiers. Phoenix suddenly darted forward, moving with impossible speed for something so small. The kit ran directly at Kane, who instinctively aimed at the small target. That moment of distraction was all Daniel needed. His stun round caught Kane's center mass, sending him sprawling. But Kane was enhanced, probably with military-grade augmentations. He was already getting back up when Artemis did something Daniel had never seen before. She touched her nose to Kane's forehead, and the man went rigid. Through their connection, Daniel could feel what she was doing. She was showing Kane everything, every memory from every space fox who had been hunted, captured, experimented on. Years of accumulated suffering flooding into his mind in seconds. Kane screamed and collapsed, his eyes wide with horror. He wasn't physically hurt, but Daniel doubted he'd ever be the same. Sometimes, understanding the full weight of your actions was the worst punishment possible. They left him there and took the last pod, launching just as the transport's security forces reached the bay. The small vessel was cramped with one large human, an adult space fox, and Phoenix squeezed inside. But they made it work. Through the pod's viewport, Daniel could see the battle still raging. Mira had destroyed 3 of the 4 escort fighters, but the last one had her pinned down. Her ship was venting atmosphere and listing badly. "Can you do something?" Daniel asked Artemis. The exhausted space fox looked at him, then at the battle outside. She pressed her paws against the pod's hull and closed her eyes. Daniel felt her reaching out, not with telepathy but with that strange ability to manipulate fundamental forces. The remaining escort fighter suddenly jerked to one side, as if grabbed by an invisible hand. Its pilot fought for control, but Artemis held it steady, turning it away from Mira's ship. The strain was visible on her face, her whole body trembling with effort. Mira didn't waste the opportunity. Her remaining weapons locked onto the immobilized fighter and fired. The escort exploded in a brief fireball that was quickly swallowed by the vacuum of space. "Thanks for the assist," Mira's voice crackled over comms. "Now, let's get out of here before they send real reinforcements." The rendezvous point was an abandoned mining station in a nearby asteroid field. The escape pods had all made it safely, and Daniel spent the next hour helping to transfer 43 frightened Space Fox kits onto Mira's damaged but still functional ship. Despite everything they'd been through, the kits were remarkably resilient. Some were already playing with each other, their trauma temporarily forgotten in the joy of freedom. Artemis moved among them like a shepherd, offering comfort where needed, discipline when youngsters got too rowdy. She had taken on the role of mother to all of them, not just Phoenix. Daniel watched her work with growing respect. She was exhausted, injured from the strain of using her abilities so extensively, but she never stopped caring for the others. "She's remarkable," Mira said, standing beside him. "I've studied their species for years, but seeing her in person, they're so much more than our scientists ever imagined." "What happens to them now?" Daniel asked. "We can't keep 43 kits on our ships." "I know a place," Mira said. "A colony world that's off the official charts. Other rescued Space Foxes are already there, along with humans who've chosen to protect them. It's not perfect, but it's safe. And the hegemony will come after us with everything they have," Mira admitted. "But something tells me they're about to have bigger problems." She pulled out her datapad and showed him a series of files. "My daughter didn't just send me locations and transport schedules. She sent me their entire research database. Every experiment, every autopsy, every violation of interstellar law regarding sentient species. I've been sitting on it for years, waiting for the right moment to release it. And that moment is now. The moment was when those kits sang to those guards," Mira said. "Did you see their faces? The realization that they were complicit in something monstrous that's going to happen on a galactic scale when this information goes public." Daniel thought about the implications. The hegemony's power rested on their moral authority as much as their military might. If the public learned they'd been torturing sentient beings for profit, "It'll mean war," he said. "Maybe," Mira agreed. "Or maybe it'll mean change. Either way, these kits and others like them won't have to hide anymore." Phoenix padded over and climbed into Daniel's lap, purring with exhaustion. The little one had been incredible today, brave beyond measure for something so young. Daniel stroked the kit's silver fur and felt a wave of protective affection that surprised him with its intensity. "You did good today, little warrior," he said softly. Phoenix's mental touch was warm and content. But there was something else there too, a question that formed in Daniel's mind as clearly as spoken words: home. Daniel looked at Artemis, who was watching them with those impossibly intelligent eyes. He thought about his empty ship, his purposeless wandering, his 5 years of running from the past. Then he thought about what it had felt like to have a mission again, to protect instead of just survive. "Yeah," he said to Phoenix, "we'll find home." But even as he said it, he realized something had changed. Home wasn't going to be a place. It was going to be wherever this strange little family was together. A burned-out soldier, an alien mother who'd lost everything, and a kit who'd somehow chosen them both. The next few days were a blur of activity. They jumped through a dozen systems, laying false trails and doubling back to confuse pursuit. The kits were distributed among the ships, with Artemis somehow managing to keep them all calm despite the constant movement. Daniel found himself acting as an impromptu uncle to several of the youngsters who had attached themselves to Phoenix. One kit in particular, a tiny female with unusual golden markings, refused to leave Daniel's side. She had been one of the most traumatized, with surgical scars covering most of her body. But something about Daniel seemed to calm her. She would sit next to him in the cockpit, watching him work with intense concentration. "I think you've been adopted again," Mira observed, watching the golden kit follow Daniel around the ship. "Story of my life lately," Daniel replied. But he was already fond of the little one. He'd started calling her Aurelius, after the golden color of her markings. They were 3 days into their journey when Artemis suddenly went rigid, her fur standing on end. Through their connection, Daniel felt her alarm like a physical blow. Something was coming. Something bad. "Mira, we've got incoming," he said into the comm. "I don't see anything on sensors," she replied. "Trust me. Or rather, trust Artemis. She feels something." Seconds later, 3 hegemony battlecruisers dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of them. Not patrol boats or escorts, but full military vessels designed for war. Someone had decided the Space Foxes were worth deploying serious hardware. "This is Admiral Reeves of the Hegemony Fleet," a voice boomed over all channels. "You are in possession of stolen property and are guilty of terrorism against the Corporate Council. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Daniel looked at the overwhelming firepower arrayed against them. 3 battlecruisers against 2 damaged civilian ships. It wasn't even a fight. It was an execution waiting to happen. "Mira," he said quietly, "get the kits out of here. Jump to your safe colony. We'll buy you time." "Don't be stupid, Carter. You can't fight 3 battlecruisers." "No," Daniel agreed, "but we can distract them long enough for you to escape." He was already moving to the weapons console when Artemis stopped him with a paw on his arm. Her mental touch carried a single word: no. Then she did something that defied everything Daniel thought he knew about the Space Fox's abilities. She sat in the center of the cockpit, closed her eyes, and began to sing. Not like Phoenix's emotional song from earlier, but something deeper, more primal. It resonated through the ship's hull, through space itself, reaching out across impossible distances. She was calling for help. The response came faster than Daniel would have believed possible. Space around them began to ripple and distort. Then, one by one, ships began appearing. Not hegemony vessels or human ships at all, but something else entirely. Crystalline constructs that looked more grown than built, each one unique and beautiful in its alien architecture. Space Foxes. Dozens of them. But not just adults like Artemis. These were different, older, with fur that seemed to contain starlight itself. The eldest of their species, the ones who had learned to merge their consciousness with technology itself, becoming living ships. The lead vessel, a massive construct of silver and light, positioned itself between the human ships and the hegemony fleet. When it spoke, the voice came through every comm system simultaneously, bypassing all encryption and security. "These ones are under our protection," the voice said, ancient and powerful. "You will withdraw." Admiral Reeves, to his credit, tried to maintain military composure. "This is hegemony space. You have no authority here." "We have authority everywhere our children are threatened," the voice replied. "You have hunted us, caged us, dissected us. It ends now. You're threatening the hegemony. Do you have any idea what you're starting?" "We are not starting anything," the ancient space fox said. "We are ending it. Your data on our species has been transmitted to every major news network in human space. Your crimes are now public. Your authority is already crumbling." Daniel checked his feeds and gasped. Mira had done it. The research data was everywhere, accompanied by footage from their rescue mission. The video of Phoenix singing to the guards was already going viral, with millions of views in just minutes. The comment sections were filling with outrage and horror at what the hegemony had done. "This won't stand," Admiral Reeves said, but his voice had lost its certainty. The council will do nothing," the Ancient One interrupted. "Because if they do, we will reveal the full extent of our capabilities. Did you think we were merely animals with minor psychic abilities? We are a species that achieved spaceflight before your ancestors discovered fire. We chose pacifism, chose to let younger species find their own way. But that choice ends if you threaten our children again. To emphasize the point, one of the crystal ships gestured, and the lead battlecruiser's weapons simply stopped working. Every system went dead. Not damaged, but fundamentally altered at the quantum level, their very atoms refusing to maintain their configured purposes. "Impossible," Reeves breathed. "Leave," the Ancient commanded. "Now. And tell your council that the space foxes are no longer hiding. We will trade with those who approach us in peace. But any who come with violence will find that we are far more than they imagined." The hegemony fleet withdrew, jumping to hyperspace with what Daniel could only describe as embarrassed haste. He sat in his cockpit, stunned by what had just happened. In minutes, the entire balance of power in known space had shifted. The ancient space fox's attention turned to their small group. "You have protected our young at great cost to yourselves. This will not be forgotten." Artemis stood and approached the view screen, touching it with one paw. The communication that passed between her and the Ancient was private, but Daniel felt echoes of it through their bond: gratitude, respect, and something else. An invitation. The Ancient Space Fox's invitation hung in the air, like a question that could reshape everything. Through his bond with Artemis, Daniel understood what was being offered: sanctuary. Not just for them, but for all the rescued kits, on the Space Fox's hidden homeworld, a place no human had ever seen. "We need to talk about this," Daniel said to Artemis. Though he knew the Ancient One could hear everything through their quantum-entangled communication network, Artemis's mental touch was gentle but firm. She showed him images of the kits they'd rescued, still traumatized and needing proper care. She showed him Phoenix, who, despite all the bravery displayed, was still just a child who deserved to grow up among their own kind. And she showed him something else: her own loneliness. Years of being the only adult of her species in vast stretches of space. Always running. Always hiding. "You need your people," Daniel said quietly. "I understand that. But what about us, Mira and me? We're not exactly going to blend in on a space fox world." The Ancient One's voice resonated through the ship again. Amused this time. "You think you would be the first humans to walk among us? Your species has a saying: it takes a village to raise a child. Some of your kind have been part of our village for longer than you might imagine." Mira's voice crackled over the comm. "Carter, are you hearing this? They're saying humans have been living with them. Those who proved themselves," the Ancient confirmed. "Those who chose to protect rather than profit. Your actions have proven your worth. The choice is yours." Daniel looked around his cramped cockpit. Phoenix was curled up in the co-pilot seat, Aurelius pressed against his leg, and Artemis watching him with those impossible violet gold eyes. When had this mismatched group become more important to him than his own species? "We need to deliver the kits somewhere safe first," Mira said, ever practical. "And I need to ensure the data release has its intended effect. Give us 3 days to tie up loose ends." "Time flows differently for us," the Ancient replied. 3 days or 3 years, we will wait. The coordinates have been sent to your navigation systems. Come when you are ready." The crystalline ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving only normal space and the lingering sense that reality had shifted fundamentally. "Did that just happen?" Daniel asked. Phoenix chirped and jumped into his lap, nuzzling against his chest with obvious affection. The kit's mental touch carried a simple message: family stays together. "Yeah, little one," Daniel said, scratching behind Phoenix's ears. "Family stays together." The journey to the temporary sanctuary took 2 days. It was a moon, orbiting a gas giant in an uncharted system, terraformed decades ago by human separatists, and then abandoned when the hegemony cut off supply lines. Now, it served as a way station for those operating outside the law, including Mira's network of space fox protectors. The settlement was larger than Daniel expected. Prefab buildings arranged in neat rows, atmospheric processors humming steadily, and even a small spaceport capable of handling a dozen ships. But what really caught his attention was the population humans and space foxes living together, working together, their children playing together in the dusty streets. "Welcome to Haven," Mira said as they disembarked. "Not very imaginative naming, I know, but it serves its purpose." The rescued kits were immediately surrounded by other space foxes, adults who had escaped captivity years before. Daniel watched as they were gently led away for medical treatment and psychological care. Several humans were part of the care team, people who had clearly been working with the space foxes long enough to understand their complex communication. "How long has this been going on?" Daniel asked. "Haven about 3 years," Mira replied. "But humans and space foxes working together decades. Probably longer. We just got better at hiding it after the hegemony started their hunting program." A man approached them, older, walking with a slight limp. His face was scarred from old burns, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Mira, good to see you back safe. And you must be Carter. Heard about your stunt with the transport. Impressive work." "Daniel, this is Colonel Harrison, retired," Mira introduced. "He runs security for Haven." "Just Harrison now," the man said, extending his hand. "Haven't been a colonel since I refused orders to bombard a space fox nursery colony. That was 15 years ago." 15 years. Daniel was surprised. The hegemony has been hunting them that long. "Longer," Harrison said grimly. "But it accelerated about 5 years ago when they made some breakthrough in their research. They discovered the space fox's quantum consciousness abilities could be weaponized. Imagine soldiers who could communicate instantly across any distance, who could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, who could predict enemy movements through probability analysis. They wanted to turn them into weapons," Daniel said, disgusted, but not surprised. "Worse, they wanted to extract those abilities and implant them into human soldiers." Harrison's expression darkened. "The experiments were unsuccessful, fatal for both the space foxes and the human subjects. But they kept trying." Aurelius, who had been hiding behind Daniel's leg, peeked out at Harrison. The golden-marked kit was still skittish around strangers, but something about the old soldier seemed to reassure her. "Hello, little one," Harrison said gently, crouching down. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you again." Aurelius chirped softly and took a tentative step forward. Harrison remained perfectly still, letting the kit approach at her own pace. When she finally sniffed his extended hand, he smiled. "They never cease to amaze me," he said. "After everything humans have done to them, they still find it in themselves to trust us." "Some of us," Mira corrected. "The right ones." That evening, Daniel found himself in what passed for Haven's community center, watching human children and space fox kits playing together. Phoenix had immediately joined the games, the injuries and trauma of recent days seemingly forgotten in the joy of having peers to play with. Aurelius stayed close to Daniel, but she was watching the others with obvious longing. "Go on," Daniel encouraged her. "It's okay. You're safe here." The golden kit looked up at him, then at the playing children, then back at him. "I'll be right here," he promised. Slowly, cautiously, Aurelius crept toward the group. Phoenix noticed her approach and immediately bounded over, chirping excitedly. Within minutes, Aurelius was cautiously participating in what seemed to be an elaborate game of tag that somehow incorporated both human rules and space fox telepathic elements. "They bounce back fast," a woman said, sitting down next to Daniel. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "Kids always do, no matter the species." "You sound like you speak from experience," Daniel observed. 3 years of it, she confirmed. "I'm Sarah. I run the integration program here, helping rescued space foxes adjust to freedom teaching humans and foxes how to coexist. It's challenging but rewarding work. How did you end up here? Sarah's expression grew distant. My partner was a xenobiologist on Research Station Omega. When she discovered what they were really doing, she tried to whistleblow. They made it look like an accident. Mira found me after, recruited me. Said the best revenge was making sure no other space fox suffered what those in the labs did. Your partner, was she? Mira's daughter. Yes, Sarah confirmed. We were going to be married. Instead, I ended up here, trying to continue her work in a different way. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play. Daniel noticed how naturally the humans and space foxes interacted, each species learning from the other. The human children were developing rudimentary telepathic sensitivity just from proximity, while the fox kits were picking up human language and customs with remarkable speed. It's not sustainable here, though, Sarah said eventually. Haven is a band-aid, not a solution. We need something more permanent, more protected. The Ancient One mentioned their homeworld, Daniel said carefully. Sarah's eyes widened. They actually offered that. Do you understand how unprecedented that is? No human has ever been invited to their true sanctuary. What do you know about it? Rumors, mostly. They say it's not in normal space, that it exists partially in a quantum dimension we can barely perceive, that time flows differently there, that the laws of physics are more suggestions than rules. But those are just stories from space foxes who remember it from before the diaspora. Artemis appeared beside them, having been checking on the other rescued adults. She settled next to Daniel, her massive form radiating warmth and contentment. Through their bond, she shared her own memories of the homeworld, fragmented and distant. A place of crystal forests that sang in harmony, of skies that shifted through impossible colors, of technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. You want to go back, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. Artemis's response was complex. Yes, she wanted to return to her people, but she also showed him images of their journey together, of Phoenix choosing him, of the bond they'd formed. Family stays together, her thoughts conveyed. But family also needs a home. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked the perimeter of Haven, weapon habitually at his side despite the safety of the settlement. The two moons cast strange shadows across the landscape, and he found himself thinking about choices and consequences. 5 years ago, he'd failed to save his squad because he'd trusted the wrong intelligence, made the wrong choice. He'd spent every day since running from that failure. Now he was being asked to make another choice, one that would affect not just him, but Artemis, Phoenix, Aurelius, and potentially the relationship between two species. Can't sleep either, Mira's voice came from behind him. Too much to think about, Daniel admitted. The homeworld invitation, among other things. This war that's coming, because there will be a war. The hegemony won't just accept that the space foxes are off limits now. They've invested too much, have too much to lose. Probably, Mira agreed. But that's not really what's bothering you, is it? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I've been alone for 5 years. By choice. It was easier than risking attachment, loss, failure. Now I've got a family I never asked for but can't imagine losing. And they want me to follow them into the complete unknown. Sounds terrifying, Mira said with a slight smile. Also, sounds like exactly what you need. What about you? Will you come if they extend the invitation? My war is here, Mira said. The data release is already having an effect. 3 colonial governments have announced investigations into hegemony research programs. There are protests on 17 worlds. The corporate council is in emergency session. This is the moment I've been working toward for 5 years. You could die. The hegemony doesn't forgive threats to their power. Probably, Mira said again. But my daughter believed in doing the right thing regardless of the cost. I dishonor her memory if I do less." Before Daniel could respond, alarms began blaring across the settlement. Harrison's voice crackled over the emergency comm system. "Incoming ships detected. Hegemony signature. All defensive positions immediately." Daniel and Mira ran for the command center, finding Harrison already coordinating the settlement's limited defenses. The display showed 5 ships approaching fast. Not battlecruisers this time, but stealth assault vessels designed for quick, brutal raids. "They found us," Harrison said grimly. "Must have tracked one of the rescue ships." "Evacuation?" Mira asked. "No time. They'll be here in minutes." Daniel's mind raced. Haven had some defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand against a coordinated military assault. The settlement would be destroyed. Everyone in it killed or captured. "We need to buy time," he said. "I'll take the Vagrant's hope up. Maybe I can—" Artemis's mental touch stopped him. She was already moving, heading not for the ships, but for the center of the settlement. Phoenix and Aurelius followed, along with every other space fox in Haven. They formed a circle. Adults on the outside. Kits protected in the center. "What are they doing?" Harrison asked. I think they're going to fight," Daniel said, feeling Artemis's determination through their bond. "Their way." The space foxes began to sing. Not the emotional manipulation Phoenix had used on the guards, or the summoning call Artemis had sent to the ancients. This was something else, something that made the air itself vibrate with potential energy. Daniel felt the hair on his arms stand up as electromagnetic fields began fluctuating wildly. The hegemony ships dropped out of their attack run, their instruments going haywire. One ship's engines simply died, sending it tumbling through space. Another's weapon systems began firing randomly, as if the targeting computers had gone insane. But the lead ship managed to launch something before its systems failed. A single missile, hardened against electromagnetic interference. Old technology, but reliable. It streaked toward the settlement, toward the circle of space foxes who were too focused on their defense to notice the incoming threat. Daniel didn't think. He ran, sprinting faster than he ever had, his augmented muscles pushed to their limits. He reached Artemis, just as she sensed the danger, just as she began to turn. He shoved her aside, threw himself over Phoenix and Aurelius, and felt the world explode. The missile hadn't been nuclear, but it was close enough. The blast wave shattered buildings, tossed bodies like leaves. Daniel felt his armor crack, felt bones break, felt heat that should have killed him instantly. But somehow, impossibly, he held on. He kept his body between the blast and the kits, even as darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. The last thing he heard was Phoenix screaming, a sound that wasn't quite vocal, but resonated in his very bones. Then the darkness claimed him. He woke to impossible colors and the taste of starlight. The pain was gone, replaced by a sensation of floating in warm liquid. Daniel tried to open his eyes and discovered he could see in spectrums that didn't have names, perceive dimensions that shouldn't exist. "Easy," a voice said, both familiar and strange. It was Artemis, but her mental touch was clearer than ever before, as if the barriers between their minds had dissolved. "You're still healing." "Where?" Daniel managed to ask, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or just thought it. "Home," Artemis replied. "Our home. The ancient ones brought us here after you saved us." Memories flooded back. The missile, the blast, the desperate need to protect Phoenix and Aurelius. "The kits, are they safe? Because of you. You shielded them with your body, took damage that would have killed them instantly." Daniel tried to move and discovered his body responded differently than before. He could feel every atom of his being, could sense the quantum probability clouds that defined his existence. "What happened to me?" "You were dying," another voice said. Daniel turned to see one of the ancient space foxes, its form shifting between solid and pure energy. Your sacrifice earned you the right to choose death with honor, or life transformed. Phoenix chose for you. Phoenix. The kid appeared. But like everything else here, Phoenix was more than before. The silver fur contained actual starlight. Those violet gold eyes held depths of intelligence that transcended age. When Phoenix touched him, Daniel felt their minds merge completely. He experienced the kit's terror at seeing him fall, the desperate plea to the ancients to save him, the willing sacrifice of part of Phoenix's own quantum essence to stabilize Daniel's dying form. You gave yourself for us. Phoenix's thoughts were crystal clear now. So I gave myself for you. We are bonded now, deeper than family. Where you go, I go. What you are, I am part of. Daniel understood then what had been done. The space foxes hadn't just healed him. They had elevated him, merged human biology with their quantum consciousness abilities. He was still human, but also something more, something in between. The others, he said suddenly. Mira, Harrison, Haven. Safe, Artemis assured him. The Ancient Ones intervened directly after you fell. The hegemony ships were relocated. Their crews are unharmed, but we'll have an interesting time explaining how they ended up in a completely different galaxy. Different galaxy. Daniel sat up, finally taking in his surroundings. They were in what looked like a garden, but the plants were crystalline structures that grew and shifted like living things. The sky above showed no stars, just swirling patterns of energy that his new perception told him were actually folded space-time. The homeworld exists partially outside normal space, Artemis explained. It can be reached from anywhere, but also from nowhere. It is safe, has always been safe. We just chose to leave it, to explore, to learn about other species. Some of us forgot the way back. Others, like me, thought we had lost the right to return. Why? Because we failed to protect our young. Because we let ourselves be hunted, caged, experimented on. The shame was overwhelming. Daniel reached out and placed his hand on Artemis's head, marveling at how he could now feel her thoughts as clearly as his own. There's no shame in survival, no failure in choosing to trust. Even when that trust is betrayed, you kept Phoenix alive, kept hope alive. That's not failure, that's heroism. Aurelius appeared, the golden kit bouncing excitedly. She had no fear here, no trauma shadowing her eyes. This place, Daniel realized, was healing for the space foxes in ways that went beyond the physical. So what now? He asked. Do we stay here forever? That is your choice. The Ancient One reappeared, its form more solid now. You have earned the right to sanctuary, but you have also earned the right to be more. The bonding with Phoenix, your transformation, these are not common things. You are now a bridge between our species, capable of existing in both worlds fully. Daniel thought about Mira, still fighting her war against the hegemony, about Harrison and Sarah at Haven, trying to build something better, about all the humans and space foxes still out there, still in danger. Can I come and go? He asked. Help both here and in normal space. The paths between worlds are open to you now, the Ancient confirmed. You could be an ambassador, a protector, a teacher. The choice is yours. Daniel looked at Phoenix, who was watching him with those impossible eyes. At Aurelius, who had overcome such trauma to trust again. At Artemis, who had chosen him as family when she had every reason to hate his entire species. I want to help, he said. Both species. Show humans that space foxes aren't resources to exploit, but people to learn from. Show space foxes that not all humans are hunters, that some of us are worthy of trust. A dangerous path, the Ancient warned. You will be hated by some, hunted by others. The hegemony will see you as a traitor to your species. I've been running from who I was for 5 years. Daniel said. Maybe it's time to run toward who I could be instead. Phoenix made a sound that was pure joy, launching into Daniel's arms with enough force to knock him backward. Aurelius joined the pile, followed by several other kits who had been watching from a distance. Even Artemis seemed to smile, if such a thing were possible for a space fox. Then it is decided, the ancient said. You will be our first human guardian, protector of both worlds, bridge between species. It will not be easy. The best things never are, Daniel replied, surrounded by his strange, wonderful, impossible family. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. A false distress signal on a barren planet. A trapped kit that needed help. A mother's desperate decision to trust a stranger. Each choice had led to the next, creating a chain of events that had changed not just his life, but potentially the future of two civilizations. The war between the hegemony and the space foxes was far from over. There would be battles to fight, prejudices to overcome, wounds to heal. But for the first time in 5 years, Daniel had something worth fighting for. Not just survival, not just redemption, but a future where human children and space fox kits could play together without fear, where the vast differences between species could be a source of strength rather than conflict. When do we start? He asked. 6 months had passed since Daniel's transformation, though time was a fluid concept when you moved between dimensions. He stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed embassy station, a marvel of combined human and space fox technology orbiting Earth's moon. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from a dozen worlds arriving for the first Interspecies Council meeting. Nervous? Phoenix asked, the kit's mental voice as clear as if spoken aloud. Phoenix had grown considerably, now reaching Daniel's waist, the silver fur shimmering with an inner light that marked those touched by the quantum realm. Terrified, Daniel admitted, adjusting the formal robes that marked him as a guardian. They were woven from space fox fur freely given and human synthetic fibers, a symbol of unity that felt heavier than any armor he'd ever worn. It's easier to fight a battle than to negotiate a peace. Aurelius patted over, the golden-marked fox now serving as one of the junior ambassadors. Her trauma had healed remarkably in the homeworld's nurturing environment, and she had discovered a gift for languages, both human and otherwise. The hegemony delegation has arrived, she informed them, her mental touch tinged with anxiety. Daniel sighed. This was the moment they'd been working toward. After months of economic pressure, political upheaval, and 3 failed military attempts to recapture space fox specimens, the hegemony had finally agreed to negotiations. The cost of fighting beings who could manipulate reality itself had proven too high. Let's go meet them, he said, feeling Artemis's presence approaching from the corridor. She had become the official representative of the space fox nations, her natural authority and maternal wisdom making her the perfect diplomat. The hegemony delegation was led by someone Daniel hadn't expected: Admiral Reeves, the same officer who had threatened them 6 months ago. The man looked older, worn down by the political firestorm that had engulfed the hegemony. Beside him stood a woman in civilian clothes who radiated barely contained ambition. Director Walsh of the Science Division. Daniel recognized from intelligence reports. Guardian Carter, Reeves said formally, though his tone carried resentment. I see the rumors of your transformation are true. Daniel's eyes had changed, now carrying flecks of violet and gold that marked his quantum-touched nature. He could see probability streams around the Admiral, possible futures branching out based on the choices made here. Most led to continued conflict. A precious few led to peace. Admiral Reeves, Daniel replied. Thank you for coming. This is Artemis, voice of the Fox Nations. Artemis stepped forward, her massive form graceful, despite her size. She didn't speak, couldn't in human language, but her telepathic touch was precisely controlled, conveying greeting without intrusion. Director Walsh flinched at the mental contact. Fascinating. The neural integration is even more sophisticated than our research indicated. She pulled out a recording device. If I could just... No recordings, Daniel said firmly. This meeting is about ending the exploitation, not enabling it. Exploitation. Walsh's voice turned sharp. We were conducting legitimate scientific research. These creatures have abilities that could revolutionize human civilization. It's our duty to understand them. These creatures are people, Daniel countered. They had spaceflight when humans were still figuring out agriculture. The only reason you could capture them at all was because they chose pacifism over violence. Chose, Reeves interjected. They're animals, Carter. Sophisticated animals, but... Phoenix stepped forward and did something that shocked everyone in the room. The young fox spoke, not telepathically, but with actual vocal cords that had been slowly adapting over the months of living among humans. We are not animals, Phoenix said carefully, each word a struggle but clear. We choose peace. You choose war. Who is animal? The silence that followed was deafening. Director Walsh's scientific mind was visibly reeling from the implications. A non-human species developing human speech in mere months suggested a level of biological adaptability that challenged everything they thought they knew. You can speak, she breathed. How is that possible? We learn, Phoenix replied. We adapt. We survive. Mira entered the conference room then, followed by Harrison and Sarah. The human resistance had become official in the past months, recognized by 17 colonial governments as a legitimate humanitarian organization. The political pressure they'd applied had been instrumental in forcing these negotiations. Sorry we're late, Mira said, though her timing was clearly deliberate. I thought the hegemony delegation should see who they're really negotiating with. Not just space foxes and one transformed human, but hundreds of thousands of humans across known space who refuse to let this genocide continue. Genocide is a strong word, Reeves said. What else would you call the systematic hunting and experimentation on a sentient species? Sarah asked. My fiancé died trying to expose what you were doing. How many space foxes died in your labs? That's classified, Walsh said automatically. Artemis moved then, faster than something her size should be able to. She was suddenly directly in front of Walsh, her massive head level with the woman's face. Through their bond, Daniel felt Artemis's controlled fury, the memories of lost kits, murdered mates, destroyed communities. She shared those memories with Walsh, not violently, not as an attack, but as testimony. Every space fox who had died in the labs. Artemis knew their names, their stories, their final moments. She gave them all to Walsh in a single, overwhelming moment of truth. The director collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Admiral Reeves reached for his sidearm, but Daniel was already there, his quantum-enhanced reflexes making him impossibly fast. Don't, Daniel said quietly. She's not hurt. She's just learning what you've really been doing. Walsh looked up, her face streaked with tears. 3,421, she whispered. That's how many died in our facilities. I felt them all. They had names, families, dreams. She turned to Reeves. What have we done? We did what was necessary for humanity's advancement, Reeves said. But his conviction was wavering. No, a new voice said from the doorway. You did what was profitable. Everyone turned to see a figure that shouldn't have been there. Commander Marcus Kane. The man Artemis had mentally devastated during the transport raid. But he looked different now. Healthier somehow. More at peace. Kane, Reeves said, shocked. You were listed as missing in action. I was recovering, Kane replied, entering the room. The space foxes found me after the raid, catatonic from what Artemis had shown me. They could have left me to die, could have killed me for what I'd done to their kind. Instead, they healed me. Not just my mind, but... He paused, struggling for words. They showed me what I'd lost. My humanity. My compassion. They gave it back to me. He turned to Artemis and did something unprecedented for a human military officer. He knelt. I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't undo the harm, but I'm sorry. Artemis approached him slowly, then gently touched her nose to his forehead. Through Daniel's connection, he felt her forgiveness, not just for Cain, but as an offer to all humanity, a chance to start over. This is what we're proposing, Daniel said, pulling up a holographic display. A treaty between our species, full recognition of space fox sovereignty, immediate cessation of all hunting and experimentation, return of all captured specimens and research data. In exchange, the space foxes are willing to share certain technologies, establish trade relationships, and help humanity understand quantum consciousness. You're asking us to give up everything, Reeves protested. We're asking you to give up exploitation, Mira corrected, in exchange for partnership with a species that could teach humanity to transcend its current limitations. The board will never agree, Walsh said, though she seemed to be reconsidering everything. The board no longer has a choice. Harrison spoke up. Public opinion has turned completely. The videos of Phoenix singing, of the kits playing with human children, of space foxes protecting human settlements from raiders. People won't accept going back to the old ways. As if to emphasize the point. Phoenix walked over to Director Walsh, who was still on her knees. The young fox sat directly in front of her and extended one paw. It was the same gesture that had started everything, the simple offer of trust that had changed Daniel's life. We forgive, Phoenix said. We teach, you learn together better. Walsh looked at the extended paw for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took it. The moment their hands touched, Daniel saw the probability stream shift. The paths toward war faded, replaced by futures of cooperation and mutual growth. I'll take your proposal to the board, Walsh said, standing with Phoenix's help. I'll make them understand. And if they refuse, Reeves asked. Then I'll release everything, Walsh replied. Every experiment, every death, every lie we told to justify it. My career will be over, but at least I'll be able to sleep again. The negotiations continued for hours, hammering out details, establishing frameworks for cooperation. Daniel found himself serving as translator and mediator, his unique position allowing him to understand both species' perspectives fully. Phoenix and Aurelius worked alongside him, their presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. By the end of the day, they had a preliminary agreement, not perfect, not everything they'd hoped for, but a beginning. The hegemony would officially recognize Space Fox sovereignty and cease all hostile actions. In return, the Space Foxes would establish an embassy on Earth and begin limited technology transfers. As the hegemony delegation prepared to leave, Admiral Reeves approached Daniel privately. You know this won't be easy. There are factions within the hegemony who see this as surrender. They'll try to sabotage the peace. I know, Daniel replied. But there are also space foxes who want revenge for what was done to them. Peace is always harder than war. That doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for. Reeves studied him for a moment. You've changed, Carter. And not just physically. I found something worth protecting, Daniel said simply. It makes all the difference. After the delegation left, Daniel found himself alone with his chosen family on the observation deck. Artemis was curled around Phoenix and Aurelius, the three of them radiating contentment despite the day's tensions. Through the windows, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars, while ships continued to arrive from distant worlds. You did well today. Artemis's mental voice was warm with approval. We all did, Daniel corrected. Phoenix speaking was the turning point. I didn't even know that was possible. Phoenix's mental touch carried amusement. Many things possible. We just beginning. The kit's right, another voice said. One of the ancient space foxes materialized on the deck, its form shifting between states of matter. Today marks a new chapter for both our species. But there is something more we must discuss. Daniel felt a ripple of anticipation through his quantum awareness. What do you mean? You are the first guardian, but you will not be the last. The ancient explained. The bonding you share with Phoenix, the transformation you underwent, it can be replicated. Not forced, never forced, but offered to those who prove worthy. You're talking about creating more human space fox hybrids. Not hybrids, the ancient corrected. Bridges. Beings who fully understand both worlds and can help our species grow together. Phoenix has already identified several candidates among the humans at Haven. Daniel thought about the implications. A new form of existence. Neither fully human nor space fox, but something unique. It would challenge every assumption both species had about identity and belonging. It has to be voluntary, he said. On both sides. No one should be forced into a bond they don't want. Agreed, the ancient said. Which is why we need you to help establish the protocols, the safeguards, the selection criteria. You understand what it means to be transformed, what is gained and what is changed. What about the hegemony? They'll see this as a threat. Some will, the ancient acknowledged. Others will see it as an opportunity. Imagine human explorers who could navigate quantum space, soldiers who could prevent conflicts through empathic understanding, scientists who could perceive reality at the subatomic level, and space foxes who could better understand human creativity, ambition, and drive. Artemis added, Our species' contemplative nature has sometimes made us passive. Perhaps a touch of human dynamism would serve us well. Daniel looked at Phoenix, his bonded partner, who had saved his life by sharing their essence. What do you think, little warrior? Not little anymore, Phoenix replied with dignity, then added with youthful enthusiasm. Want more friends like us, not alone between worlds. The first academy will be established here, the ancient continued, where candidates from both species can learn, train, and determine if they're suited for bonding. You would be one of the instructors, along with Artemis. And if the hegemony tries to stop us, then they will learn that evolution doesn't ask permission, the ancient said with what might have been amusement. Change is coming whether they accept it or not. The question is whether they'll be part of it or left behind. Over the following weeks, the embassy station grew into something unprecedented. The Academy wing was constructed using Space Fox crystal technology that responded to thought and emotion. Dormitories that could accommodate both species' needs. Training rooms where quantum abilities could be safely explored. And meditation chambers where potential partners could explore compatibility. The first candidates arrived from Haven, 3 humans and 3 space foxes, who had already formed close friendships. Daniel watched them train together, learning each other's languages, cultures, and ways of thinking. Not all would achieve the deep bond necessary for transformation, but all would leave changed by the experience. Sarah was among the first humans to attempt bonding, partnering with a young adult space fox named Cosmos, who had lost his family to hunters. Their first attempts at mental connection were awkward, sometimes painful, but Daniel saw the potential there. They had both lost loved ones to the conflict. Both wanted to ensure no one else suffered the same losses. It's harder than I expected, Sarah admitted, after a particularly intense session. Opening your mind completely to another being, it goes against every human instinct for privacy and independence. But Daniel prompted, but when it works, even for a moment, she smiled. I understand why you and Phoenix are so close. It's like finding a part of yourself you didn't know was missing. Kane, surprisingly, had also volunteered for the academy, though not for bonding. He wanted to understand, to make amends through service. He became one of the most effective human instructors, teaching space foxes about human military tactics and psychology while learning their approach to conflict resolution. "Redemption isn't a destination," he told Daniel one evening. "It's a journey. Every day I try to balance the scales a little more." The peace held, though not without challenges. Extremist factions on both sides attempted sabotage. A group of human supremacists tried to bomb the embassy station, only to be stopped by the combined efforts of human security and space fox probability manipulation. A vengeful pack of space foxes attempted to attack a hegemony research station, but Daniel and Phoenix intercepted them, talking them down through their shared connection to all quantum-touched beings. Each crisis weathered made the alliance stronger. The technology transfers began showing results, medical breakthroughs using space fox regenerative techniques, energy systems based on quantum manipulation, communication networks that operated faster than light. Humanity was advancing more in months than it had in decades. But more importantly, the cultural exchange was transforming both species. Human art and music took on new dimensions when created in collaboration with Space Fox sensory perception. Space Fox philosophy evolved to incorporate human concepts of individual achievement and ambition. Hybrid settlements began appearing on frontier worlds, places where the two species lived and worked as equals. 1 year after the treaty signing, Daniel stood once again on the observation deck. But this time he wasn't alone. 20 new Guardians stood with him, beings who had successfully bonded and undergone the transformation. Each was unique, the joining creating something different based on the individuals involved. Sarah and Cosmos had become strategic coordinators, their combined abilities allowing them to perceive and prevent conflicts before they escalated. Another pair had become explorers, able to navigate the strange dimensions between normal space and the quantum realm. A third had become healers, using their enhanced understanding of both species biology to cure previously untreatable conditions. "Look what you started," Mira said, joining him. She had become the human director of the academy, working alongside Artemis to guide the next generation. One act of kindness to a trapped kit, and you changed the course of 2 civilizations. "We all changed it," Daniel corrected. "Every choice, every act of trust, every moment of forgiveness, it all mattered." Phoenix, now fully grown and magnificent, pressed against his side. Through their bond, Daniel felt his partner's complete contentment. They had found their purpose, their place in the universe. Aurelius approached, leading a group of young kits and human children who were part of the Academy's early education program. They wouldn't attempt bonding for years, but growing up together would make them natural partners when the time came. "Guardian Carter," Aurelius said formally, though her mental touch carried warmth. "The younglings have a question." One of the human children, a girl of about 6, stepped forward boldly. "Is it true you were just a normal human before, and now you can see the future and walk between stars?" Daniel knelt to her level, smiling. "I was normal, yes, and I can't exactly see the future. More like possibilities. As for walking between stars," he held out his hand, letting quantum energy dance between his fingers in patterns that made the children gasp in wonder. "That part's true." "Can we learn to do that?" a space fox kid asked, its mental voice full of hope. "Maybe," Daniel said. "If you work hard, trust each other, and remember that differences make us stronger, not weaker. But even if you never transform, you're already part of something amazing. You're the generation that will grow up seeing both species as family." The children scampered off to continue their lessons, leaving the adults in contemplative silence. Through the windows, Daniel could see more ships arriving. Not military vessels this time, but transports carrying families, traders, diplomats, and dreamers. The embassy station was becoming a true melting pot of interspecies cooperation. The Hegemony Board meets tomorrow, Mira informed them. Final vote on full integration versus maintaining separation. They'll vote for integration, Artemis said with certainty. Through their bond, Daniel felt her accessing probability streams, seeing the most likely futures. Too many have seen the benefits. Too many have been touched by the changes. The old ways are ending. And the new ways, Daniel asked, are just beginning, Phoenix added. That night, Daniel found himself in the quantum meditation chamber, a space that existed partially in both normal space and the Fox homeworld. Here, he could feel the pulse of both civilizations, the fears and hopes of billions of souls moving toward an uncertain but promising future. He thought about his old squad, the ones he'd failed to save on Titan Station. Would they approve of what he'd become? Of the choices he'd made? He liked to think they would. They had been good soldiers, but more importantly, good people. They would understand that sometimes the greatest victory wasn't defeating an enemy, but turning them into an ally. A presence touched his consciousness. Not Phoenix or Artemis, but something vast and ancient. The collective consciousness of the Space Fox species. The quantum network that connected all of them across space and time. You have done well, Guardian, the presence conveyed. But your greatest challenge lies ahead. What do you mean? Instead of words, he received a vision. Ships from beyond known space. Beings neither human nor Space Fox. The universe was vast, and humanity's expansion had attracted attention. Some species would come in peace, others in conquest. The alliance between humans and Space Foxes would be tested by forces greater than either had faced alone. We will be ready, Daniel said with determination. Yes, the presence agreed. Because you have learned the greatest truth. Strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together. The kit you saved you in return. The enemy you fought became your ally. The family you never expected became your greatest treasure. The presence faded, leaving Daniel with a sense of purpose that went beyond anything he'd felt as a soldier. He wasn't just a guardian or a bridge between species. He was part of something larger, a transformation that would ripple out across the galaxy and beyond. Phoenix found him there, as Daniel knew his partner would. The Fox settled beside him, their minds merging in the comfortable harmony they'd developed over the months. Ready for tomorrow? Phoenix asked. Ready for whatever comes, Daniel replied. Together, they watched the stars through the quantum space, seeing not just points of light but possibilities, futures where humanity and Space Foxes explored the universe as partners, where the children playing in the academy grew up to achieve things neither species could imagine alone. The false distress signal that had started everything seemed like a lifetime ago. Daniel had answered it, expecting nothing, finding everything. A trapped kit had become family. An enemy had become an ally. A burned-out soldier had become a guardian. And this was just the beginning. As dawn broke over Earth, visible even from the lunar orbit, the embassy station hummed with activity. The hegemony vote would happen in hours. But the outcome almost didn't matter anymore. The transformation had already begun, unstoppable as evolution itself. Daniel stood, Phoenix beside him, and walked back to the observation deck where Artemis and Aurelius waited. His family, strange and wonderful and perfect in its impossibility. So, Artemis asked, what now? Daniel grinned, feeling Phoenix's matching amusement through their bond. Now we teach, we protect, we build bridges. We show the universe that the most powerful force isn't weapons or technology, but the simple choice to see the other as family. Even when they start as enemies, Aurelius asked. Especially then, Daniel replied, remembering Cain's redemption, Walsh's transformation, even Reeves' grudging respect. Those bridges are the strongest of all. The stars beckoned, full of mysteries and challenges. But Daniel wasn't facing them alone anymore. He had Phoenix, bonded to his very soul. He had Artemis, the mother who'd chosen him. He had Aurelius, and all the rescued kits who looked to him for protection and guidance. He had a purpose that went beyond redemption, beyond survival. He was helping to write the next chapter of two species stories, and that chapter began with a simple truth. When you rescue a space fox baby and her mom decides you're family now, you don't just save them. They save you right back. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you save each other's entire civilizations in the process.